Good afternoon, class.
Good afternoon, teacher.
This is our third lecture in my course of selected readings in British and American poetry. I'll talk about John Milton and his Sonnet 19. I will first read aloud the poem for you. Sonnet 19. When I consider how my light is spent ere half my days in this dark world and wide, and that one talent which is death to hide lodged with me, useless, though my soul more bent to serve therewith my Maker, and present my true account, lest he returning chide. Does God exact day labor light denied? I fondly ask. But patience to prevent that murmur soon replies, God does not need either man's work or his own gifts. Who best bared his mild yoke, they serve him best. His state is kingly, thousands at his bidding speed and post over land and ocean without rest. They also serve who only stand and wait. John Milton is known as one of the very greatest and most influential English poets, ranking with Chaucer and Shakespeare. He wrote both poetry and prose. And his poetry, we have, pastoral, elegy, epic, drama, sonnet, and other kinds. Milton is best known for his epic poem, ParadiseLost, which is the greatest epic in English language and has been considered the center of English lyric criticism since its publication in 1667. This is, William Blake's engraving of Milton's ParadiseLost. Now I'll try to read out the first 16 lines of ParadiseLost to you. Of man's first disobedient, and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world, and all our woe with loss of Eden, till one greater man restore us, and regain the blissful sea. Sing heavenly muse that on secret top of Oreb, or of Sinai, didst inspire that shepherd who first taught the chosen seed in the beginning, how the heavens and earth rose out of chaos. And if Zion Hill delight thee more, and Silo's brook that flowed fast by the oracle of God, I thence evoke thy aid to my adventurous song, that with no middle flight intends to soar above the Aeolian mount, while it pursues things unattempted, yet in prose and rhyme. Here, first of all, I just want to give you a sense of the grand style of Milton's epic composition. Milton follows all the rules of the epic genre in this invocation to guide him in the writing of the epic. Traditional epics begin with ritual, so does ParadiseLost. An epic poet begins by announcing his epic theme, and Milton declares that he will tell the story of the fall of human race through the disobedience. Within the broadly stated epic subject, Milton lets us know that in his story, Christ, Jesus Christ, will restore what Adam and Eve lost. An epic poet also signals his dependence on supernatural beings, the muse. Here in this poem, sing heavenly muse. The muse. The poet evokes to the muse to guide him in the task of composition. Milton amplifies this into a prayer to God, who inspired Moses to write primeval history, and the God of the temple on the Mount Zion. In spite of all these epic elements, Milton's story is the opposite of a conventional epic. I mean, Milton was very revolutionary. His story is different from traditional epic. Traditional epic is a success story, but Milton's story is a story of human failure. It's a story about, man's first disobedience. The classical epic poets evoke a pagan muse, but Milton evokes the Christian God. Traditional epic focuses on a conquering hero. Milton's epic protagonist is an archetypal sinner. It's Satan. So in every way, Milton was revolutionary, and he was great. These are some pictures I took in Wheaton College, and this is, Professor Leon Wycombe. He was, teaching ParadiseLost. Leon Wycombe says, if readers of English literature know just one epic, it is ParadiseLost. Milton's powerful and rhetoric prose and the eloquence of his poetry had an immense influence on 18th century writing. His long, flowing sentences that are best understood and enjoyed when read aloud. His grand style is characterized with such features as inversion of his word order. So all the features of an epic are all present in the ParadiseLost. But his sonnets seemed not to have received enough critical attention. His particular character, the character of JohnMilton, can be found to be strongly displayed in his remarkable sonnets. Milton was born in London in 1608. His family was very wealthy. They could afford another house in the country. And he was privately tutored at home. And then he attended St. Paul's School, the famous grammar school, and he received an excellent education in Greek, Latin, Hebrew, French, Italian. Music and literature were particular favorites with this boy. And Milton began writing poetry when he was very young. At the age of 18, he attended Christ's College, Cambridge University. But he was called half in scorn, the Lady of Christ, just because of his handsome face, delicate appearance, and lofty and unpretentious bearing. During his stay in Cambridge, he began writing poetry in Latin, Italian, and English. From leaving Cambridge with a master's degree, he gave up his original plan to be a priest. He adopted no profession, but devoted himself to very intensive writing. He wrote, many poems Listers is a pastoral elegy. L'Allegro and Penserosa are two sister poems. L'Allegro means, well, a lively, joyful one, and Penserosa means a pensive, melancholy one. And these two poems describe the events of two different days in the life of a typical scholar, probably Milton himself, but in two contrasting moods. And this is William Blake's engraving of Milton's L'Allegro. And this picture is William Blake's engraving of Milton's Penserosa. But his first poem, his first published poem, was entitled On Shakespeare. It was an epitaph printed in the second folio of Shakespeare's plays, which was published in 1632. We know the first folio was published in 1623. When Milton was 30, he traveled to France and then to Italy, and where he met many leading men of letters, including Galileo. On his return to England, Milton became a political writer, which led him to advocate freedom of divorce, freedom from censorship of press, freedom from tyranny. So he wrote and published many political writings. And this is a picture of his Areopagitica, that is a speech of Mr. John Milton for the liberty of unlicensed printing. So it's pretty hard to recognize here. That is his essay, his speech about freedom from censorship of press. Chinese translation is 论出版自由. It's highly important. In 1649, Milton supported the execution of King Charles, and he became Cromwell's secretary for foreign tongues the same year. Cromwell's Republican regime. So as an official defender of the new regime, the Cromwell's Republican regime, Milton wrote many prose tracts during 1650s. But he used his eyes too much, so he became completely blind in the year 1652. And the same year, his first wife died. Then he remarried. In 1655, and in 1657, Andrew Marvell became his assistant and probably saved him from persecution after the restoration of the monarchy in 1660. Then in 1667, Milton published his ParadiseLost, which fulfilled his dream of producing a national epic. 1671, he published another two epics, Paradise Regained and a tragedy, Simpson Agonists. And Milton died in 1674. His funeral was attended by all his learned and great friends in London. So just for a few words about Milton's life and work. Now, I will have a few words about Miltonic sonnet. In the middle of the 17th century, Milton almost alone cultivated the English sonnet. He made his fame as a great English sonneteer by writing what used to be called detached or occasional sonnets. Each of his sonnets appears to be dealing with a self-sufficient thought or comment on a single person or event, but it contributes to a greater whole. Anyway, there is no continuous stories in his sonnet. Anna Nado, the author of the book Milton's Sonnets, An Ideal Community, she argues that Milton's sonnets can be read as a sequence, can also be read as a sequence, unified by an idea of community. Now, there is a community in Milton's sonnets, which is ideal and which is godly. And this community consists of a self at its center, who is surrounded by others and interacts in many ways. So each sonnet moves outward from individual center to eternal and infinite circumference. The sonnets, which detail these individual engagement of self, tend to be woven close, both matter, form, and style, so as to present a larger communal ideal which Milton envisioned for England. Professor Nado's argument, is original and very well argued, well documented. Most sonnet sequence in Renaissance focus on an individual, but few of them can be read in one sitting because, they tend to be excessively long and their themes monotonous. Each of Milton's sonnet, however, presents a different facet of his ideal, though each of Milton's sonnets maintains a lyrical intention of its kind. The whole sequence is permeated organically with different facets of the ideal of a godly community. Based on Professor Nado's reading, Milton's sonnets will range widely from love poems, public policy, domestic peace, freedom, addressing female and male friends, and also the speaker's struggle to serve God. Sonnet 19 dramatizes, the speaker's struggle to serve God in his own way. When I consider how my light is spent, Milton's Sonnet 19 was first printed in Poems, a collection, 1273, but the title was probably added to it by an early editor, so on his blindness. We have this familiar title for this poem. And the occasion of this poem is Milton's becoming totally blind at the age of 44. Okay, now, let's look at the poem line by line. When I considered how my light is spent, ere half my days in this dark world and wide, is spent, pretty easy to understand. That means used up, is used up. As I mentioned, Milton probably overused his eyes, writing a lot of political tracts, articles. So his light is spent, is used up. In this first line, the poet considers how his light is used up or wasted in this world. Since, Milton was a religious poet, strongly religious poet. So the light in this poem refers not only to his ability to see, his eyesight, but also refers to his spiritual light of life. Light of life. Ere half my days, as I mentioned, the occasion was in the year 1652, when he was about 44 years old. So half of my days in this world. In this dark world and wide, I just want to mention this is one of the typical ways that Milton uses adjectives, putting one in front of it, in front of the noun it modifies, and one behind it. And that one talent, which is deaf to hide, launched with me useless, though my soul more bent there with my Maker. That one talent. What is that one talent? So, that one talent is a biblical allusion here. It alludes to the parable of talents in Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 to 30 in the New Testament. Launched with me useless. This means that, his talent. Of course, his talent refers to the ability to see and at the same time, ability to write. But launched with me useless. The talent becomes useless because he has lost his sight. Okay, let's look at the parable of talents in Matthew, in the New Testament. It says it is as if a man, that is the master, going on a journey, and summoned his slaves. Now he called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2 talents, to another 1 talent. Now talent, a talent was worth about 20 years' wages of a laborer. A slave has to work for 20 years so as to make 1 talent. So a talent is a lot of money. And the master gave 5 talents to 1 slave, 2 talents to another, and 1 talent to another, according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who had received 5 talents went off at once and traded with them and made 5 more talents. And the one who received 2 talents did the same thing. He made 2 more talents. But the one who had received just 1 talent went up and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. Then when their master came back and settled accounts with them, then the one who had received 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I've made 5 more talents. And the master said to him, Well done, good, trustworthy slave. And also, the master said to the one who made 2 more talents, Well done, good, trustworthy slave. Then the one who had received only 1 talent also came forward, saying, Master, I knew that you were a husbandman, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid. I went and hid your talent in the ground. Now here you have what is yours. But the master replied, You wicked, lazy slave. So, for this worthless slave, the master threw him into the outer darkness. This is the story in the Bible. In the Bible. Here, that one talent which is deaf to hide, lodged with me useless. Milton here actually claims not only one single talent, that is his ability to see, but also his literary talent, that his ability to write. So it's a pun. It's a pun on a word. With this talent, a poet could have earned immortality. Therefore, to hide that one talent means death. So that one talent, therefore, refers to both, the poet's own sight and his lyric talent at the same time. Though my soul more bent therewith my Maker, although my soul is even more inclined to serve God with that talent, here in these two lines, we see the speaker's desire to serve God through poetry, to use his talents for the glory of God. It would be therefore very frustrating for the poet, right, for Milton, a poet, to want to serve God with his writing, but to feel his lyric talent will be wasted, will be taken away, because he was becoming, he becomes blind. Useless. It's an interesting word, useless. Without interest. It's also a pun here. Therewith, with what? With both my sight and literary talent. Present my true account. The poet wishes ultimately to give a good account of himself and his service to God. To give my true account. So here, in these few lines, we get a sense that, the poet wishes very much that he can serve God with, his lyric talent, to present his true account, lest he return in chide. Chide means rebuke. So the master, upon returning, rebuked the third servant for hiding and therefore wasting his given talent. Lest he return in chide alludes to the second coming of Jesus Christ, when everyone will be judged, whether he will go to heaven or the other way. So meaning so that, he won't rebuke me when he returns. So if I can serve God with my lyric talent, I will not be rebuked when he returns. Does God exact day labor like the night? Exact means demand or ask for. What does God want? What does God ask for? Day labor refers to labor for daily wages or hired by the day. Milton asks whether God demands a full day's labor from those without sight. And thus alludes to the parable of the laborers in a vineyard in Matthew chapter 20. It's another biblical allusion. Because in that chapter, some of the laborers worked for a full day. Others worked only part of a day. Light the night. This is an absolute participle phrase. It means it's with light denied me, or at the same time denying me light. I fondly ask. Fondly means foolishly. I foolishly ask. The first 8 lines of this sonnet form grammatically just one long sentence, the main clause of which consists of the first 3 words in line 8. I fondly ask. Line 7, in quotation marks the question that is asked and is therefore the object of ask. So the first 6 lines of this poem form an adverbial clause containing 2 coordinated noun clauses, of which the second is again loaded with 1 attributive clause and 2 adverbial clauses. If we rearranged the first 6 lines of the sonnet, we have this long sentence. I fondly ask. I fondly ask. Does God exact date labor light denied? When I consider, 1, how my light is spent ere half my days in this dark world and wide. 2nd, how that one talent which is death to hide is lodged with me uselessly, though my soul be more bent to serve therewith my Maker, and to present my true account, lest he, refers my Maker, returning chide. Returning, when he return, he should chide me. So it's pretty difficult for us to straighten out Milton's sentences, long and flowing sentences, and the inversion of word order. Okay, but patience, Christian patience, of course, or faith in providence. Patience here means, faith in providence. Patience, Christian patience, could be a saintly virtue. Saintly virtue. But patience to prevent that murmur soon replied. Here, I would like to call your attention to the but. As I mentioned, in an Italian sonnet, the logical or emotional term occurs at the beginning of line 9. But here, the but appears in the middle of line 8. So this sonnet is structured on a standard format of an Italian sonnet, which consists of an octave and the sextant. The octave which establishes the problem, and a sextant that solves the problem. And in keeping with Milton's practice of introducing innovations into conventional forms, Milton was very revolutionary. And he places the term of thought in the middle of line 8, rather than at the beginning of line 9. And patience here is personified, as if, he is to prevent that murmur. What is that murmur? That murmur refers to, does God exact day labor light denied? Patience is personified as if he wants to say no to that. But what interests us most here is that even patience cannot wait till the beginning of line 9, in which a term of thought is usually invited in an Italian sonnet. A murmur, the expression of discontent, that is, Milton's questioning of God's will. God's will. What is God's will? Does God just want me to work during the day and denied my light. So God does not need either man's work or his own gifts. It was a commonplace that man returns God's gifts, right? Patience' reply here explains one aspect of nature of God and affirms a kind of service to God that is different from the service advocated in the parable of talents. But here we have another answer. Patience' reply here explains one aspect of the nature of God and affirms a kind of service to God that is different from the service in the parable of talents. First of all, God does not need man's work or his own gifts. Then what does he want? Who best bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. Who best bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. They who best bear his mild yoke serve him best. In other words, those who are most obedient to God's will serve him best. This image of the yoke, this is, you can see the yoke. This image of the yoke is a biblical allusion. A yoke is a kind of harness put on oxen. So who best bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. In Matthew chapter 11, a yoke is an image for God's will. God's will. God does want us to serve. It refers to the duties God places on one's shoulders. For in Matthew 12, chapter 11, we have verses like this. For my yoke upon you, and learn of me. For my yoke that is easy, my burden is light. So his state, is kingly. Thousands at his bidding speed and post over land and ocean without rest. His state is kingly. Whose state? God's state is kingly. God's greatness, which patience here goes on to explain, to elaborate in the next line. Thousands at his bidding speed, post over land and ocean without rest. Now this is, the state of God. Milton compares two classes of angels here, the inferior orders and the superior orders. There are two kinds of service to God. The inferior orders that post over land and ocean without rest. Very active service, public service. And also the superior orders. They never leave God's presence and enjoy the highest contemplative insight. And this make the end of the poem a triumphant one. You see the last line here. They also serve from the stand and wait. They also serve from the stand and wait. Wait, of course, is wait on the Lord. Wait on God. It's a phrase frequently found in the Bible. And Milton, when they use wait, attend as a servant to receive orders. But its more common meaning is to state in expectation. State in expectation. So it suggests that there are more than one way to serve God. So patience is personified here. He is telling the poet that even his waiting, even his apparent inaction because of his blindness, can also be a kind of service if it bears the yoke well. The poem has, first of all, a dual line of thought. And both ideas are epitomized in the final line of the poem. They also serve, only stand and wait. On the one hand, well, this is a statement of resignation, as the poet, well, expresses an implied submission to the situation of standing and wait. He can only stand and wait because he's losing his eyesight. He can do nothing about that. He just wait. But the poem is also a statement of justification, as the poet finds a way to assert that they also serve. Now, if we analyze, well, the last line grammatically, you will see that they also serve, only stand and wait. Who only stand and wait. This is an attributive clause modifying they. They who only stand and wait also serve. So another important thing to learn in this poem is that it is based on an underlying quest motif in which the speaker searches for and finds a way to serve God acceptably. The poem seems to have been built around the implied question. What does it take, well, to please God? What does God want? What shall we do so as to please God? But it records how, well, he comes to understand a higher notion of service, real service. Is doing the will of God, even if it means that he must stand and wait. He can only stand and wait. So I have a few comments. Now, first, major premises of this poem is that God requires service. And my reason is the key word serve appears, well, 3 times in this poem and is the linchpin on which, well, the poem rests. In turn, the poem contrasts 2 types of service. One is very active service, public service, and that is the inferior order, post over land, ocean without rest. And the other is, well, the service of, probably we can call it in private or retirement, as opposed to public service, as opposed to active service. Second, the experience communicated in this poem is universal. For the poet, well, the experience was his blindness. But the poem does not deal with Milton's physical handicap, but with spiritual one. It's about his fear that he cannot serve God acceptably. And the solutions that the poem offers are also spiritual. Submission to God's providence, patience, even hope. Even if, well, he can only stand and wait, he still serves. In the third place, this sonnet is a mosaic of, well, biblical allusions. I will not, well, explain it too much. We have talked about that. We have, well, the parable of talents and some other allusions to the Bible. In the fourth place, Puritanism also provides a context for the poem. Puritan emphasis on calling, vocation, produce a bias in favor of active work in this world. Active work, public work in this world. But Puritan ideals also equally determined what happens in the sestet, there is submission to providence as a service to God. In the fifth place, the octave runs the course of fear, frustration, rebellion, culminating with the question, does God exact day labor, light denied? So a whole complex of feelings and attitudes is encompassed, well, in this question, including fear, incredulity, accusation of unfairness. It seems as if, well, God is unfair to him. You want me to work during the day and does not want to give me eyesight. Protest, confusion, rebellion. We can read all these feelings into the text. But we need to note that the question is asked fondly, that is, foolishly. So the expected answer should be no, rather than yes. God, well, does not require a service that someone can ever perform. Okay, in the last place, prosodically speaking, prosody, in terms of prosody, by dismissing the break between octave and sextant, or varying the position of the term. Now, Milton succeeds in making his thoughts and feelings coherent down to the end of the sonnet. This is also a contribution to recover metrical beauty of the normal Italian form, as I mentioned that during the middle of the 17th century, Milton probably was the only poet who's still working on sonnet, writing sonnets. In the second place, well, Milton seems to have treasured the device of a run-on lines, enjambments. Run-on lines is one of the most effective technique in his presentation, in his poetic presentation. In this sonnet, well, we have in all 7 run-on lines, which reinforce the emotional enjambment. Very strong. The third place, against, well, the iambic pentameter background, some metrical substitutions are used in this poem. So Milton used many metrical substitutions in this poem. For example, in the second line, we have a pyrrhic. There is 2 unstressed syllables. A pyrrhic can reinforce the effects of rapidity, lightness, ease, while a spondee, that is 2 stressed syllables, can reinforce the effects of slowness, weight, and difficulty. This, well, theory advocates by Professor Paul Fussell. But here Milton juxtaposes, well, spondee with a pyrrhic. He put, well, the 2 stresses together with the 2 unstressed syllables, which seems to prepare for the spondee as if by depriving us a stress, thus making us desire 2 stresses in succession all the more. So in this way, Milton voices his intense grievance at God's apparently unfair treatment of him. In the fourth place, the sound of this same line seems a natural echo to its sense. The use of long vowels in every stressed word with their effects of assonance brings the reader's sympathy over the misfortune of the poet. And finally, the word wide is inverted, not only for the sake of rhyme, the regular iambic foot, but also for firing a connotation of the boundless terror to the poet. And that is, well, further reinforces by the heavy alliterated words, world and wide, day and dark. So through the metrical analysis of this line, Milton's craftsmanship in handling the sonnet is clear at a glance. Okay, any question? Now this is, well, the assignments for next lecture. Try to learn by heart Milton's Sonnet 19. And write a journal about the theme of Milton's Sonnet 19. And then prepared for our next lesson, and try to read John Donne's Valediction Forbidden Morning. It's a long poem, but it's a wonderful poem, a love poem in metaphysical poetry of the 17th century. Thank you very much.